To make us also understand now what CAJ, because so far I can see that there are a number of gaps, particularly in terms of public information and in terms of what people should expect from CAJ. Because there's a lot of work happening, I believe, at CAJ. But I think the question we are starting to ask ourselves is, do we have this information? Do we have access to this information? And do we have a mechanism of engaging the people who are supposed to benefit from this service so that they are able to be at a point where they are even aware that there's some kind of recourse for them. They're even aware that there's an avenue through which they can be able to have their issues addressed. And this is a question that we need to have answered from CAJ. So let me welcome Mr. Sammy Cheboy, who works for the Commission on Administrative Justice, Advocacy Manager, just to give us his perspective on the topic of discussion. Karibu.
Right. As has been said, I'm Sammy Cheboy from Office of the Ombudsman. That's the shorter name that people are likely to remember. But of course, we basically deal with these issues of administrative justice. The kind of illustrations that Henry has mentioned are the kind of things that on a daily basis we come face to face at the Commission. And in this session, I'll basically share with you what we do and some of the successes that we've been able to register, as well as to point out some of the challenges that have come between us and the aspirations that we have, that we want to see an efficient public service. It would not surprise you then that we may not have made the kind of strides that we would wish to have made because of the nature of public service. And in this sense, I would want us to appreciate that the commission, the precursor to this commission, is the Public Complaints Standing Committee that was set up in 2007 as a way of handling public complaints. Because then there was a realization that members of the public were complaining about not getting services, or delays in getting services, or outright cases of corruption, ineptitude, and cases of unprofessionalism among public officers. So the commission then was set up within the Constitution of 2010 through an Act of Parliament in 2011. So this week we are 6 years old, and the first set of commissioners exited last week. So we are 6 years in operation as Commission on Administrative Justice. So under Article 59(4), we have the Kenya National Human Rights, of course, through the various acts of Parliament and National Human Rights Commission. We have the National Gender and Equality Commission, basically being our sister commissions. So Parliament, in its wisdom, decided that we needed to have 3 commissions to deal with the mandate of Article 59(4), and that's why we have 3 commissions being separate. The mandate of CAJ basically covers all state and public officers at the national and the county governments. But as I'll point out, we've had challenges, especially dealing with a majority of counties, because many of them believe that they are independent of oversight from any other body. But through our efforts, some have come on board, and many are now willing to be subjected to our oversight, especially on administrative issues. We also act on public complaints that we receive through various means. I'll point out some of those ways in which individuals can launch complaints with us. And also we also intervene on our own motion on some cases that we feel that administrative justice is not being done or is impeded by a public body, a public officer, and all that. And we also have the mandate of oversighting the Enforcement of Access to Information Act 2016. I'll mention what has happened so far. It's a new mandate that we were given under the Act that was passed in 2016, September. Basically, the Commission deals with issues of maladministration. So basically this, we encounter cases of improper administration or failure by public agencies to offer services that they are mandated to offer to members of the public. So majority of the complaints that we receive revolve around issues of delay in getting services or inaction by those who are supposed to act on particular administrative requirements. Then we have issues of inefficiency, ineptitude, of course, discourtesy. You would go to a public office and officers have no care in the world as to the presence of a member of the public who is seeking services. Of course, issues of incompetence among some of these public officers is an ongoing concern, and also unresponsiveness. You would want to be served, but then nobody would basically be available to offer services, or they even ignore. So in some cases, you might go to an office and nobody seems to recognize your presence, or if it's correspondence, your letter is, just kept to cut dust, and therefore no action is being taken. Of course, we have issues of administrative injustice. These are cases where there is an act or decisions that are carried out in public service, or there's a failure to act when it is demanded so of the public office or public officers. And within this, we have the Fair Administrative Action Act 2015. Professor there mentioned earlier on those parameters within which public service must be offered. They must be expeditious, they must be efficient, they must be professional, timely, so that, of course, if you have to take action against anybody, especially the kind of cases that we get mostly on these issues of consultation, or basically letting people know why certain actions must be taken, involves employees in public service, where people get sacked, or dismissals which do not follow the laid down laws and procedures. You may be aware of the recent cases of county governors, especially after this transition, following the August 8th election. So many governors were, even before taking office, they had begun to fire staff in their hundreds. And we did issue an advisory opinion on the same, warning them, of course, that they had not adhered to requisite laws in as far as giving those employees a chance to be heard and also to defend themselves. But of course, some of them went ahead and ignored, and we've seen cases of some of those affected staff going to court and obtaining favorable orders, because clearly cases of violation of the law in the course of trying to do what some of those governors believed was right, the courts were there to, or basically the courts will always be there to intervene and basically restore sanity. Of course, we also have issues of misconduct and integrity issues being part of the complaints that we receive. What we do is occasionally, based on the trend of the kind of complaints that we receive, and especially if they touch on specific ministries or specific public entities, that we may commence investigations beyond the normal kind of inquiries, because whenever we receive a complaint, we will always write to the affected institution or affected public officer to seek their opinion, or basically their perspective on the complaint that has been raised. And in cases where we see a trend where certain individuals or certain entities have complaints, many complaints against them, then we have an investigations directorate that deals with those issues. So we go further and see issues that may be beyond the individual into and maybe the system. So systemic issues investigated. So far, the Commission has conducted 25 investigations into various matters that affect good public administration. Just mention one or two that you may be aware. Last year we had the Cabinet Secretary, actually early this year, for education, trying to give an order to relocate the Kenya Technical Teacher Training College to the Kenya Science Campus of the University of Nairobi. Of course, the order was irregular in the manner that those who are going to be affected were never consulted. There was no public participation as to what would become of the facilities of KTTC, and of course also the Kenya Science Campus, what would become of their facilities, because the kind of training offered by KTTC would not make use of the kind of sophisticated labs that are available at the Kenya Science Campus. Similarly, what would happen to students of Kenya Science Campus and their staff and all those kind of things. So the Commission undertook an investigation into the circumstances surrounding that order, and the ministry was directed to hold implementation of the same, and if need be then, they would have to undertake public participation so that all outstanding issues can be brought on board and an amicable way out could be established. Another case of an investigation that we did carry out and released a report late last year, tied on the NGOs Coordination Board, and particularly its CEO, Faisal Mohammed. You may have read his issues, how he was running, or actually how he runs the institution, because to date he's still in office, and of course issues of his academic credentials are questionable, and the Commission did establish that they were a forgery, and the EACC went ahead and did confirm the same. But of course, once we do this kind of investigations, then we go ahead and share with the relevant entities that DCI should be able to take up criminal kind of investigations, and the ODPP then should be able to commence prosecution. And the public service, of course, the employer, the relevant ministry, then should be able to commence action to remove such an individual. But surprisingly, like we always had such cases, no action has been taken. And besides that, the individual has been fighting the Commission in court, why this report should not be implemented, and those are issues that are in court. The other, of course, so many of them that we do carry out, and individuals in these circumstances always have a way of trying to fight back. People always say impunity fights back, and we have that experience as a Commission. Any move we make, the other side will always try and get the better of us. The other aspect that I may mention is from the outset, I realize that not so many of you have interacted with the Commission or have sought our services. Our directorate is charged with trying to undertake outreach activities. We do occasionally carry county awareness. We do advocacy on media, both the vernacular and mainstream. We also participate in Agricultural Society of Kenya shows. We do share information on our website and our social media platforms. We also have a committee that reaches out to communities, and we call them ombudsman committees, where we have champions. We formed committees in especially some of the residential areas in Nairobi, and particularly the low-end residential areas, where we have these communities and we have these committees to empower them to understand what are their rights and how they can complain. So they always pick up complaints from members of the public touching on institutions or public officers and forward to us. So we try to collaborate with them in that manner. Of course, we do produce IEC materials, basically to explain our mandate. And we also carry out visits to prisons, basically to interact with prisoners. And on these occasions, we always get a lot of complaints, either mistreatment from prison authorities or delays in their cases being heard in the courts. So we pick some of this and take it up with the relevant agencies. Then the Commission also issues advisory opinions, basically giving suggestions or proposals on how to improve public administration, and also make recommendations touching on legal, policy, and administrative measures to address any concerns. And just mention some of this. Recently we had the issue of the county governments dismissing employees. We did issue an advisory opinion on the same, explaining what the governors can and what they cannot do. We also, prior to the August 8 elections, we issued an advisory on issues of public resources and participation of public officers in political activities. Because in that advisory, we did recommend to the ODPP specific individuals and institutions that it needed to take further action on. And I believe one of them has actually, we've had a case in court relating with the Presidential Delivery Unit that we found out that it was advertising contrary to election laws. I think there's an institute, there's an institution that has taken it up in court. But of course, like in other cases, we've had frustrations, especially from the other side of the ODPP, because as a commission, we have no prosecutorial powers. We can only recommend to the ODPP. And we were very specific in that advisory opinion as to what these individuals and institutions did and attached the evidence that we had in our possession. We also had another opinion on spending by counties. We always see this coming up. Even yesterday we were told about 28 billion was spent on travel. We think that this is not a proper way of applying the limited public resources to non-core business of service delivery. Of course, you should be aware that we have a problem on prioritizing issues within public service. So the non-core business at times gets to have the lion's share in terms of the budget available. And on the issue of complaints handling, we do train public officers from all public institutions. This especially is in regards to performance contracting. The government annual performance contracting, we come in to implement the indicator on resolution of public complaints. So in this, we train public officers on effective methods of handling complaints, and we assist them in setting up infrastructure to make it possible for any member of the public who has complained, who is not satisfied with service that they receive from such entities, they should be able to complain. And under this, we've trained more than 10,000 public officers from 789 institutions. That's for the last 6 years we've been in existence. And we do also carry out periodic spot checks, basically to see the operational setup of some of these institutions, so that we also try to forestall the kind of challenges that they experience in serving the public. And within 6 years, the Commission has did receive 345,703 complaints. But out of this, we had 87% that were directly related to our mandate, because at times members of the public would complain to us, but upon scrutiny of the nature of the complaint, we realized that we may not be competent enough to deal with it. So 13% of these complaints were outside of our mandate, and 286,059 were resolved, so representing a resolution rate of 83%. So the 13% that we were not able to process, we refer to the competent institution. And in this case, we have an arrangement with other independent offices, such as the EACC, NCIC, KNHCR, the National Anti-Corruption Steering Committee, and many others. We have an online referral mechanism that we call Integrated Public Complaints Referral Mechanism, where if EACC, a member of the public lodges a complaint with them, and in the assessment, the complaint falls within our mandate, then they're able to refer using that online platform. So we have that working relationship. We also undertake alternative dispute resolution. This is especially in cases where there's need for mediation. Like somebody mentioned earlier on, you may realize that the court processes are time-consuming, they're expensive. In some cases, even the courts themselves request the parties to a case whether they are willing to undergo mediation under our facilitation. And from time to time, the courts would call upon us to assist in undertaking mediation. And of course, we also, through our work, we advocate service, or basically service to marginalized groups. And the new mandate on access to information, which the Act which came into effect last year. So far, what we've done is that we are in the process of developing a simplified version of the Act. We have challenged with the issues of regulations, which the ministry is supposed to drive that process. And we are on our end in the process of trying to come up with the guidelines, because that's what falls within the mandate of the Commission. But on the issue of regulation, we engage with the Minister of ICT to take it forward. The challenge that we've had, we've been slow in rolling out this Access to Information Act, is that the issue of funding has been problematic, because Treasury had not seen the need to fund this. But this year, we hope in next financial year, we should be able to get some support. We've managed to convince the Vision 2030 under the medium-term plan 3. Currently, there's a committee working on the priorities in Mombasa, and our team is there. We've managed to have access to information as a subsector on its own. So this then means that when it comes to lobbying for funding from Treasury, it will be much easier for us, having secured the recognition of access to information as a subsector. But the main challenge really has been funding, and of course the issue of the regulation, so that now the Act can be fully implemented. Nevertheless, we've had complaints from members of the public complaining against not accessing information from certain entities, and we handle those complaints as the way we normally do. And we also have promotion of constitutionalism. We have participated in 30 matters of public interest litigation in the courts. Whenever we see that something that is beneficial to the public and we are in a position to litigate it in courts, we've been able to do that. And we also promote rule of law through election monitoring and observation. We also observe police recruitment from time to time. And we also have an initiative to promote servanthood in public service through Huduma Ombudsman Awards, our own initiative, which is in its 4th year. We try and recognize those public officers who do well. Of course, on the issue of the challenges that the Commission has come across, we have, of course, issues of attitude within the public service. People are very slow in embracing change, and of course, at times, there's even outright resistance of our oversighting those institutions, and this is within the case of the counties, but we are winning them over to realize that the fact that the Commission comes on board to ensure administrative justice does not imply that we are undermining their independence as devolved units. Of course, the bureaucracy within public service has been a challenge, especially in the timelines within which we resolve complaints. So at times, we correspond to relevant agencies that have complaints against, members of the public have complained against them, and at times it takes longer. So sometimes our clients feel like we are slow, but then we have encountered bottlenecks on the other end. But we see improvements with these continued trainings and continued spot checks. But of course, the issue of funding is a known fact. That, of course, then affects our staffing levels, because we also need to devolve our services to the counties, but we are not able to. So far we have branch offices in Mombasa, Kisumu, Eldoret, we have in Isiolo, and we have presence in 11 Huduma centers, just to try and manage the issue of devolving our services within the funding gaps. Of course, on our side, we are accountable to the public. Any member of the public can complain against us. We make ourselves available for scrutiny. I believe this forum is one such. We are willing to listen to what we are doing well or what we are not doing well. We do also make reports, present reports to Parliament, and we also have judicial reviews. We can make a decision which you can challenge in court. Our reports, like I mentioned, do get challenged in court, and we have other commissions that also oversight us, and we also have linkages with AOMA, which is an association of ombudsmen and mediators of Africa, or African Association of Ombudsmen and Mediators, and we also have International Ombudsman Institute as one of the collaborating agencies that we try to learn from the best. So thank you for listening to me.
Let's clap for Bwana Cheboy. Thank you very much for that information. I believe we now have a clearer picture of what the Ombudsman does, do we? And of course, I'm just surprised that they've so far handled 345,000 cases. And going by the question I asked earlier, I'm just wondering who has been taking these cases to Ombudsman, because it seems the level of public engagement is a bit low. But with that as it may, we've been shown even the processes of lodging complaint, accountability, and many other aspects on the work that they are doing. And of course, you now have a better appreciation of what perhaps you need to do when faced with a particular challenge that requires administrative action and where you should go, and hopefully the kind of service you'll be able to get there.